Eric Ward wants to know, what do you use to treat the leather, both initially and as they're used and age, if you use different things? Well, I primarily stick to two uh, conditioners. One of them is Feibings Aussie Leather Conditioner. Absolutely fantastic stuff, and that's what I use on the insides of the whip as I'm braiding them, as well as on the outside when I grease them. You have to give your whips, a light coat 2 to 3 times a year, depending on how much you use the whip, depending on your climate. But a light coat of this stuff is absolutely fantastic. And the reason I use it for the insides instead of using regular plaiting soap, I could use regular plaiting soap, and I have used that in the past, and it works just fine. You just have to have some sort of grease really to help you pull the strands tight enough. But it's just a hustle to cook, with the soap and the lard and what have you. So just buying this and using that works great for me. And I don't know, I find it kind of satisfactory in a way to use the same stuff on the inside as I do on the outside. Not that it would be a problem to use plaiting soap on the inside and this on the outside, but there's another couple of things. You could also use Picard's leather dressing. I only have a small tub of it, but it works just as well as this one. But the second thing I use is Big 4. Now, this is absolutely fantastic stuff. I never use Big 4 on the insides of the whip, primarily because I find that it doesn't quite give the same weight as the Feibing stuff. But I use it on overlays and knots if I'm really don't want to darken the leather at all. It's funny in a sense because most leather products that says that it won't darken leather actually darkens leather. And I don't know what kind of voodoo magic they use over at the Big 4 factory. It says it will not darken leather, and they mean it. This won't darken your leather at all. So whenever I feel like I really want to maintain the natural color of the hide, this is what I use, but only for the overlay. And Keith Varley, sorry if I got your name wrong. I've always wanted to make a whip, but the part that has me hesitant is the cutting all the strips for it. How hard is that part actually? Like, what tools help, or are there places where I could buy a pre-cut out kit so I can try the actual making process before I start cutting my own? Well, I know being hesitant about jumping into leather whip making is quite a common thing. The last couple of years, and especially since I released my book, I've had a lot of messages and seen a lot of people wanting to get into making leather whips, but they just feel like they have to gather up the courage some more to jump in. And honestly, it's like ripping off a band-aid. You just have to do it, And I get the feeling that you want to prepare because you don't want to waste leather, and you want to have a sense that you know what you're doing before you start. But regardless if you do it today or 3 years from now, you're gonna be completely new to working with leather. And so, I mean, there will be waste. That's just the way it is, especially for your first handful of whips before you get your hide economy dialed in. But I don't think I would recommend buying pre-cut. You should never use pre-cut lace from a spool. That's absolutely horrible stuff for braiding, primarily because you can't control from what part of the hide the lace comes from, and it might be split in places because I needed to fill up the spool. So just don't waste your time. And if you've made maybe some nylon whips or have some experience braiding, you're not gonna learn anything really from just getting leather strands, because then you're just gonna be doing the same thing as you was with the nylon. So when it comes to getting into leather whip making, the primary thing to focus on is to actually get good at cutting the laces, because making good lace is sort of essential for making a good whip. So that's really what you need to practice. But as far as tools go, you know, I know a lot. This tool get a lot of hate in the whip community, but that's the regular Aussie strander. I use this one quite a bit. This is a homemade contraption. Another lace cutter. Got a blade right here, and I can adjust the width with this nut, so I can get it closer to the blade for a narrower strand, and farther away for a wider. So that's for cutting the initial strands. Then you just have to resize them. You have to stretch them, of course. And you can make yourself a jig or tool of some sort. I use this one for the resizing. Got a blade right here and a fence that I can move for the width. And that's quite an expensive piece of equipment. You can build something similar real easy. This right here is my first one. It's just a block piece of wood with a fence that I cut out and a wing nut so I can adjust it. If you want to build something like this for yourself, the one very important thing about it that a lot of people miss is, I don't know if you can tell, but this is the slit for the blade right here. And as you might be able to tell, it's at an angle. So as the strand gets pulled through the blade sort of angles into the strand. If the cut for the blade is parallel with the fence, it has a tendency to sort of push the strand away slightly if it gets dull at all. So making a tool like that is dead easy, really. Just you probably have most of what you need in your shed or garage already. If not, it'll only be a couple of bucks. So if you want to get into leather whip making, you really have to learn how to use your hides. And yeah, that's really it. Because, braiding is essentially the same as nylon. There are some differences in techniques and tension and what have you, but you'll pick that up fairly quick. So if you want to learn leather whip making, just dive head in.